The Godfather wasn't just a film. It became a legend that defined power, loyalty, and the cost of betrayal. But behind its greatness lies a darker truth. Many of the actors lived tragedies as intense as the roles they played. Some were worn down by illness, others suffered accidents on set, and a few passed away almost unnoticed. Join us as we uncover who they really were and honor the legacies they left behind. John Cazale as Fredo Corleone. John Holland. Cazale was born on August 12, 1935, in Revere, Massachusetts. At 37 years old, he played Fredo Corleone, the fragile, overlooked middle brother of the Corleone family, in The Godfather, 1972. Fredo became the emotional fault line of the saga, exposing weakness inside absolute power. Cazale's performance quietly reshaped the tragedy of the Corleone family by showing how betrayal is often born from humiliation, not evil. That vulnerability was rooted long before Hollywood noticed him. Raised in an Italian immigrant household marked by financial strain and high expectations, Cazale grew up under emotional pressure rather than comfort. His father's theatrical background introduced him early to performance, while academic stress and insecurity pushed him inward. He found refuge in theater, building his craft slowly through stage work in Boston and New York, where he earned deep respect alongside Al Pacino and later stood out in The Conversation, 1974, and Dog Day Afternoon, 1975. As his reputation grew, his private life remained intensely personal. Cazale never married, but formed a profound romantic partnership with Meryl Streep after they met on stage in Measure for Measure. Their relationship was built on mutual devotion rather than stability, and it deepened as his health began to fail. That awareness became reality in 1977 when Cazale was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, widely linked to years of chain smoking. Despite rapid physical decline, he insisted on completing his role in The Deer Hunter, 1978, filming while visibly ill. The production was rearranged around his condition, and his presence on screen became an unspoken act of endurance, turning performance into farewell. John Cazale died on March 13, 1978, in New York City at the age of 42, with Meryl Streep at his side. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Malden, Massachusetts. His estimated net worth at the time of death was around $1 million, earned from a career that spanned just 6 years and 5 films. Marlon Brando as Vito Corleone. Marlon Brando Jr. was born on April 3, 1924, in Omaha, Nebraska. At 48 years old, he played Vito Corleone, the aging patriarch whose authority shaped an entire criminal empire, in The Godfather, 1972. Brando transformed the role into something intimate and restrained, redefining cinematic power through silence and restraint. His performance did not dominate the film, it controlled it. That control was forged through early instability. Brando grew up in a household fractured by an alcoholic father and an emotionally distant mother whose acting career kept her absent. Constant relocations and emotional neglect left him battling depression and authority issues from a young age. Acting became both rebellion and refuge, eventually leading to landmark performances in A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951, and On the Waterfront, 1954, where raw emotion replaced theatrical polish. Success, however, never brought peace. Brando married 3 times, each relationship ending in divorce and deepening personal chaos. His family life collapsed under scandal and tragedy, most devastatingly when his son Christian was involved in a fatal shooting and his daughter Cheyenne later died by suicide. These events haunted Brando, amplifying his withdrawal and reinforcing his lifelong distrust of fame and intimacy. As the years passed, physical decline mirrored emotional exhaustion. Brando suffered from pulmonary fibrosis, congestive heart failure, diabetes, and later liver cancer. Breathing became a struggle, and his final performances were limited by oxygen dependence and failing strength. Even so, he recorded a final line as Vito Corleone shortly before his death, turning his voice into a closing echo of his legacy. Marlon Brando died on July 1, 2004, at the age of 80 at UCLA Medical Center due to respiratory failure. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered partly in Tahiti and partly in Death Valley alongside those of his closest friend, Wally Cox. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $20 million. James Caan as Sonny Corleone. James Edmund Caan was born on March 26, 1940, in the Bronx, New York. At 32 years old, he played Santino Sonny Corleone, the hot-tempered eldest son of the Corleone family in The Godfather, 1972. Sonny's explosive energy injected raw volatility into the film, giving violence a human face. Caan's performance made the character unforgettable. That intensity was shaped early. Growing up in a tough New York neighborhood as the son of a Jewish immigrant butcher, Caan was surrounded by street violence and constant pressure to prove himself. School never fully contained him, and physical confrontation was often closer than comfort. Sports briefly offered direction, but acting became the real outlet, leading him from television work into early films and eventually to recognition with The Rain People, 1969, under Francis Ford Coppola. Fame, however, did not bring balance. Caan married 4 times: DJ Mattis, Sheila Ryan, Ingrid Hodgeck, and later Linda Stokes. And each marriage ended in divorce, leaving emotional distance between him and his children, including Scott Caan. As his career surged, family life fractured, and the cost of constant motion became harder to ignore. He later admitted regret over time lost to work and personal chaos. That chaos deepened in the 1980s. Following the death of his sister from cancer, Caan spiraled into substance abuse and professional withdrawal, virtually disappearing from Hollywood for nearly 5 years. His comeback roles, particularly Misery, 1990, revealed a darker, more disciplined actor shaped by loss. Yet health issues followed, including chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and long-standing heart problems. James Caan died on July 6, 2022, at the age of 82 in Los Angeles, after suffering a heart attack. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $20 million, built through decades of film and television work, from The Godfather to Elf. He left behind a legacy defined not by longevity alone, but by a single performance that proved rage, when honest, can become cinema. Richard Castellano as Peter Clemenza. Richard Castellano was born on September 4, 1933, in Queens, New York. At 39 years old, he played Peter Clemenza, the loyal, brutal Corleone capo, in The Godfather, 1972. Clemenza embodied the old-world enforcer who taught Michael Corleone how violence truly worked. Castellano turned everyday menace into one of the film's most quoted performances. That authority was forged early. Raised in a Sicilian immigrant family in Queens, Castellano grew up under constant pressure, facing discrimination and cultural marginalization. Survival meant toughness, not comfort. Before acting, he managed construction sites and worked in theater, grounding his later roles in lived tension rather than imitation. Recognition arrived abruptly. His Oscar-nominated turn in Lovers and Other Strangers lifted him into Hollywood's spotlight, and The Godfather sealed his fame. Yet success quickly curdled into conflict when disputes with Francis Ford Coppola and health-related weight demands ended his involvement in The Godfather Part 2. From that moment, opportunities narrowed instead of expanding. At home, stability never followed fame. Castellano married twice, first to Margaret Tiernan, then to actress Ardell Sheridan. But both marriages suffered under declining health and career frustration. Heart disease limited his stamina, while typecasting confined his range. The industry that elevated him offered little mercy in return. Richard Castellano died of a heart attack on December 10, 1988, at just 55 years old in North Bergen, New Jersey. He left behind an estimated net worth of about $3 million, earned during a career that burned bright but brief. His legacy endures in a single lesson whispered through cinema history. Leave the gun, take the cannoli. Al Lettieri, as Virgil Sollozzo. Al Lettieri was born on February 24, 1928, in New York City. At 44 years old, he played Virgil the Turk Sollozzo, the catalyst of betrayal and bloodshed, in The Godfather, 1972. Sollozzo's ambition ignited the film's central war. His presence forced Michael Corleone to cross the point of no return. That danger felt authentic. Lettieri grew up surrounded by real criminal influence, with family connections to organized crime shaping a volatile environment. Violence was not abstract, it was familiar. By the time he reached Hollywood, menace was second nature rather than performance. Success came fast, but burned unevenly. Lettieri dominated early 1970s crime cinema with roles in The Getaway and Mr. Majestique, often playing villains opposite icons like Steve McQueen and Charles Bronson. Coppola later admitted Lettieri's intensity elevated Al Pacino's performance, proving that a great villain creates a great hero. Yet typecasting locked him into brutality. Behind the scenes, chaos took its toll. Lettieri struggled with alcohol and drug abuse, draining both health and opportunity. 2 marriages collapsed under the strain, leaving little emotional refuge. Exhaustion replaced momentum. Al Lettieri died of a heart attack on October 18, 1975, at only 47 years old at St. Vincent Hospital in New York. His estimated net worth was about $1 million, earned in a career that peaked too quickly to stabilize. He remains cinema's reminder that some villains burn so brightly they consume themselves. Abbe Vigoda as Salvatore Tessio. Abraham Charles Vigoda was born on February 24, 1921, in Brooklyn, New York. At 51 years old, he played Salvatore Tessio, the soft-spoken strategist whose quiet betrayal seals his fate, in The Godfather, 1972. Tessio's calm demeanor made the betrayal more chilling than violence ever could. Vigoda's restraint turned a minor role into one of the film's most haunting moral moments. That restraint was forged through endurance. Raised in a poor household by Jewish immigrants from Russia, Vigoda worked from a young age, carrying both physical strain and responsibility early in life. Opportunity came slowly, forcing him to grind through decades of theater before recognition arrived. Those years shaped his discipline, eventually leading to steady work on stage and a late but powerful film breakthrough. Recognition, however, came with limits. Vigoda was frequently typecast as weary authority figures, a pattern that brought employment but also quiet frustration at being overlooked as a leading man. Television finally gave him visibility through Barney Miller and its spin-off Fish. Still, he remained defined by supporting roles rather than stardom. His personal life narrowed with time. Vigoda married twice, first to Sonia Golke, later to Beatrice Vigoda, whose death in 1992 left him deeply alone. Widowed and aging, he lived increasingly privately, even as public jokes mistakenly declared him dead years before it was true. The irony followed him for decades, masking the solitude behind the humor. Abe Vigoda died peacefully in his sleep on January 26, 2016, at age 94 in Woodland Park, New Jersey, from natural causes. He was buried at Beth David Cemetery in Elmont, New York. His estimated net worth at death was around $10 million, earned through television and film. In the end, Vigoda proved that longevity in acting is not about visibility, but about staying quietly indispensable. Morgana King as Carmela Corleone. Maria Grazia Morgana Messina was born on June 4, 1930, in Pleasantville, New York. At 42 years old, she played Carmela Corleone, the devoted, quietly enduring wife of Don Vito Corleone, in The Godfather, 1972. Carmela was not a figure of power, but of permanence. anchoring the Corleone household through silence and restraint. Morgana King's presence reminded audiences that crime empires are sustained by domestic endurance as much as violence. That endurance was learned early. Raised in a large Italian immigrant family, King lost her father young, forcing her into financial responsibility while still a child. Economic strain and grief shaped her discipline, pushing her to work while nurturing a natural musical gift. By her teens, singing became both escape and survival, eventually leading her into the Greenwich Village jazz scene. Success never came without loss. King married twice, first to jazz trumpeter Tony Frisella, a turbulent union that ended in divorce, and later to trombonist Willie Dennis, whose sudden death in a car accident shattered her emotional stability. Music became a refuge again, and albums like It's a Quiet Thing carried grief rather than ambition. Years later, the death of her daughter Grayson in 2008 reopened wounds that never fully healed. Health struggles followed quietly. King was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Even as illness progressed, her legacy as a jazz vocalist and understated actress remained intact, shaped by resilience rather than spectacle. Her performances in The Godfather Part 2 and later A Brooklyn State of Mind carried the weight of lived sorrow rather than technique. Morgana King died on March 22, 2018, at the age of 87 in Palm Springs, California, from non-Hodgkin lymphoma. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $5 million, earned through decades of music recordings and selective film work. Richard Bright as Al Neri. Richard James Bright was born on June 28, 1937, in Brooklyn, New York. At 35 years old, he played Al Neri, the cold, loyal enforcer and personal bodyguard to Michael Corleone, in The Godfather, 1972. Though rarely at the center of the frame, Al Neri became one of the trilogy's most unsettling presences. Bright's restrained performance anchored the Corleone power structure and gave the film its quiet, merciless weight. That silence did not come from nowhere. Bright grew up in a rough Brooklyn neighborhood shaped by poverty, street violence, and constant pressure to survive. Those early conditions hardened his instincts long before acting became a profession. He began performing at 18, but his early momentum was derailed when he was arrested for appearing in the controversial stage play The Beard, an obscenity case that led to a brief jail sentence. When he returned, roles in films like The Panic in Needle Park, 1971, reflected a realism born from lived experience rather than technique. While his screen presence grew stronger, his private life grew increasingly strained. Bright went through several marriages, including relationships with Elisa Teresa Granese, Sue Douglas Wallace, and later Rutanya Alda, with whom he had a son, Jeremy Bright. Long shoots and a career defined by constant movement created emotional distance at home. As the years passed, physical limits replaced professional ones. Bright developed chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a condition that slowly restricted his breathing and reduced his ability to work. The illness forced him into retreat, turning the once reliable character actor into a man navigating fragility behind the scenes. On February 18, 2006, Richard Bright died at age 68 in New York City after being fatally struck by a bus, a sudden and tragic end to a restrained life. The driver was unaware of the collision and no charges were filed. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $3 million, earned through decades of steady work. Alex Rocco as Mo Green, Alessandro Federico Petricone Jr. was born on February 29, 1936, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. At 36 years old, he played Mo Green, the volatile Las Vegas casino boss whose arrogance sealed his fate, in The Godfather, 1972. Mo Green brought raw unpredictability into the Corleone world, showing how ego can be deadlier than strategy. Alex Rocco's performance made the character unforgettable in minutes, not scenes. That volatility was not invented. Raised in a crime-saturated environment in Massachusetts, Rocco became entangled with the Winter Hill Gang in his youth. Arrests, violence, and prison time followed, including indictments for gambling and assault. By the early 1960s, survival required reinvention, forcing him to leave Boston and abandon his past before it killed him. Reinvention came at a cost. Rocco changed his name, suppressed his history, and retrained his voice and accent under the guidance of Leonard Nimoy. Even after breaking into Hollywood, the threat of real-world retaliation followed him, blurring the line between the roles he played and the life he escaped. Still, he carved out a career that spanned film, television, and voice work, earning critical recognition with the famous Teddy Z, which won him an Emmy. Personal loss shadowed success. Rocco married several times, enduring the death of his wife Sandra from cancer and the sudden loss of his adopted son Mark in 2009. These tragedies narrowed his world, pushing him toward quieter faith and introspection. Despite continued work on The Simpsons and later television roles, grief reshaped his final years. Alex Rocco died on July 18, 2015, at the age of 79 in Studio City, California, from pancreatic cancer. His estimated net worth at the time of death was around $5 million, built through acting and voiceover work. He left behind a legacy defined not by redemption, but by transformation. Al Martino as Johnny Fontaine. Al Martino was born on October 7, 1927, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At 45 years old, he played Johnny Fontaine, the vulnerable, mob-protected singer begging for a second chance, in The Godfather, 1972. Johnny Fontaine embodied the uneasy marriage between talent and power, mirroring Hollywood's darker undercurrents. Martino's real-life history gave the character an unsettling authenticity the film could not fake. That authenticity began in hardship. Raised in a working-class Italian immigrant family, Martino labored in construction before daring to pursue music. Discipline was learned through physical exhaustion, not privilege, shaping the emotional restraint later heard in his early recordings. Songs like Here in My Heart carried longing rather than polish, launching him into fame without ever insulating him from pressure. Success soon turned dangerous. As his popularity grew in the early 1950s, mob figures bought out his management contract and demanded financial control, forcing Martino to flee to England to protect himself. Exile stalled his American career just as rock and roll reshaped the industry. Even after returning, whispers of mafia influence followed him, blurring the line between his life and the fictional Johnny Fontaine. At home, instability deepened. Martino married 3 times. His first 2 marriages ended in divorce, accompanied by alcohol abuse and financial strain. The constant stress eroded family bonds and amplified his dependence on performance as emotional escape. Only his final marriage to Judith Martino brought relative stability, though the scars of earlier years never fully faded. Al Martino died of a heart attack on October 13, 2009, at the age of 82 in Springfield, Pennsylvania, 6 days after his birthday. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $10 million, earned through decades of singing and selective acting. Sterling Hayden as Captain McCluskey. Sterling Hayden was born on March 26, 1916, in Upper Montclair, New Jersey. At 56 years old, he played Captain McCluskey, the corrupt, brutal policeman protecting organized crime in The Godfather, 1972. McCluskey represented institutional rot rather than street violence. Hayden's towering presence made authority itself feel threatening. That menace grew from inner displacement. Hayden's childhood was unstable, marked by his mother's remarriages and constant relocation. He dropped out of school and ran to sea as a teenager, searching for order in motion rather than family. Even early success in films like The Asphalt Jungle could not quiet his sense of not belonging. Fame never sat well with him. Hayden repeatedly abandoned Hollywood for sailing voyages, openly despising the industry that celebrated him. His refusal to conform strained studio relationships, while roles in Johnny Guitar and Dr. Strangelove deepened his reputation as a brilliant but restless outsider. Acting funded escape, not fulfillment. Marriage reflected the same turbulence. Hayden married multiple times and fathered 6 children, yet alcoholism and severe depression fractured those relationships. His testimony before the House Un-American Activities Committee haunted him, breeding lifelong self-contempt that poisoned domestic life. Guilt became heavier than celebrity. Sterling Hayden died of prostate cancer on May 23, 1986, at the age of 70 in Sausalito, California. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was about $2 million, largely consumed by taxes, divorces, and years spent fleeing stability. He left behind books, films, and a legacy defined not by fame, but by profound moral conflict. Diane Keaton as Kay Adams Corleone. Diane Keaton was born on January 5, 1946, in Los Angeles, California. At 26 years old, she played Kay Adams Corleone, the idealistic outsider and eventual wife of Michael Corleone, in The Godfather, 1972. Kay functioned as the moral counterweight of the saga, reflecting the human cost of Michael's transformation. Keaton's performance gave emotional grounding to a world otherwise ruled by calculation and violence. That sensitivity was shaped long before the cameras rolled. Keaton grew up in a middle-class household defined less by hardship than by emotional expectation. Pressure to measure up fostered insecurity and self-doubt that followed her into adulthood. As she transitioned from stage work to film, those inner tensions surfaced on screen, later becoming a defining strength in roles such as Annie Hall, 1977. Success, however, did not translate into personal stability. Keaton never married, but her life was closely tied to long, complicated relationships with Woody Allen and later Al Pacino. These relationships were emotionally intense and creatively influential, yet ultimately unresolved. Over time, Keaton acknowledged that independence and devotion to work had quietly replaced the family life she once imagined. As her career matured, her body began to falter. In later years, Keaton suffered from recurring respiratory infections, with pneumonia becoming an increasingly serious condition. Even as her health declined, she remained professionally active, directing, writing, and appearing on screen, determined not to retreat from the creative life that had sustained her for decades. Diane Keaton died on October 11, 2025, at age 79 in Santa Monica, California, from bacterial pneumonia. She was cremated shortly afterward as tributes poured in from across the industry. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at approximately $100 million, built through acting, directing, writing, and real estate ventures. John Marley as Jack Woltz. John Marley was born on October 17, 1907, in Harlem, New York. At 65 years old, he played Jack Woltz, the arrogant Hollywood producer who wakes to unimaginable terror, in The Godfather, 1972. Woltz embodied unchecked power and entitlement inside the film industry. Marley turned a brief role into one of the movie's most unforgettable warnings. That edge came from hardship. Raised in poverty in Harlem by Russian Jewish immigrant parents, Marley worked from an early age to help support his family. Survival preceded ambition, shaping a relentless work ethic rather than confidence. Even before recognition, acting was a necessity, not a dream. Yet recognition never brought satisfaction. Despite appearing in nearly 250 film and television projects, Marley never became a true A-list star. Critical praise arrived late with Faces, which earned him the Volpe Cup, and Love Story, which brought an Oscar nomination. But the gap between effort and status bred frustration. Quantity never translated into security. His personal life reflected that strain. Marley married twice. His second marriage grew tense as his health deteriorated. Heart disease limited his energy, narrowing both professional opportunities and emotional patience. Acclaim could not compensate for physical decline. John Marley died on May 22, 1984, at the age of 76, following complications from open-heart surgery. He was buried at Cedar Park Cemetery in Emerson, New Jersey. His estimated net worth at death was about $1 million, earned through decades of steady work rather than stardom. Richard Conte as Emilio Barzini. Richard Conte was born on March 24, 1910, in Jersey City, New Jersey. At 62 years old, he played Emilio Barzini, the calculating rival who orchestrates betrayal from the shadows in The Godfather, 1972. Barzini represented quiet dominance rather than brute force. Conte's restrained performance made the film's final revelation chilling rather than explosive. That restraint was forged early. Raised in a poor Italian-American household, Conte worked as a truck driver, shoe shiner, waiter, and delivery man before acting offered an escape. Labor shaped his realism, grounding performances in exhaustion rather than glamour. Films like Cry of the City carried the weight of lived struggle. Success arrived, but never gently. Though a major figure in film noir with The Big Combo, Conte faced mounting financial pressure and declining health in later years. Television and European crime films kept him working, but stability remained fragile. The body aged faster than the reputation. At home, illness strained intimacy. Conte married twice. His first marriage ended in divorce, and his second grew tense as heart disease and strokes limited his independence. Vulnerability replaced control, altering the power dynamic he so often portrayed on screen. Richard Conte suffered a massive heart attack and stroke on April 3, 1975, and died 12 days later on April 15 at the age of 65 in Los Angeles. He was buried at Westwood Memorial Park Cemetery. His estimated net worth was around $2 million, built largely through classic film noir. His legacy rests on intelligence, restraint, and menace delivered without spectacle. They gave us unforgettable performances, timeless lines, and characters that still live on decades later. But behind the legend of The Godfather, many of these actors paid a heavy personal price. Which of these stories moved you the most, and which loss still feels unreal today? If this journey through Hollywood nostalgia touched you, don't forget to like the video, share it with a fellow film lover, and subscribe for more untold stories behind cinema's greatest classics.